She walked into the woods naked. No shoes, no clothes, no flashlight, just a fanny pack with a knife, a compass, and some matches strapped around her waist. She told her friend she'd be back by midnight. That was the evening of June 9, 2013. Maureen Kelly has not been seen or heard from since. What makes this case crawl under your skin isn't the strangeness of it, though it is strange. It's the fact that everyone around her saw it coming. She'd been talking about doing this for months. Her friends knew. They watched her strip down and walk into the trees, and not one of them tried to stop her. So what happened out there, in the dark, in the cold, in one of the most punishing stretches of wilderness in the Pacific Northwest? After more than 11 years, that question still doesn't have a definitive answer, and the forest where she vanished has refused to give one up. To understand why her friends reacted, or didn't react, the way they did, you need to know who Maureen Kelly was. She was born September 26, 1993, and raised by her single mother, Mafauna, in Vancouver, Washington. Not Vancouver, Canada, the smaller city just across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. She graduated from Lewis and Clark High School and was known to the people around her as Anu, a shortened version of her Hawaiian middle name, Leianuhea. Anu was creative. She had a YouTube channel where she posted videos of herself playing ukulele and beatboxing, not polished, studio quality stuff, just a young woman with a camera and a love for music. Her last video went up on June 7, 2013, 2 days before she disappeared. There's nothing in it that hints at distress, nothing that reads like a farewell, just music. Her half-sister described her as a very laid-back, carefree girl, affectionate, warm, the kind of person who hugged freely and didn't get bogged down by convention. Shortly before heading out to the campground, Maureen called her half-sister to ask if she could borrow camping gear. That's a practical detail, the kind of thing a person does when they're planning a trip, not when they're in crisis or running from something. And the spiritual quest? It wasn't new. According to Skamania County Under Sheriff Dave Cox, Kelly had been talking about going on one for some time. This wasn't an impulsive decision born out of a bad day or a sudden revelation. She'd been thinking about it, talking about it, building toward it. Her friends had heard enough about it that when she finally announced she was doing it, their reaction landed closer to acceptance than alarm. Her friend Yasmin later said she wasn't surprised Maureen had gone on the quest, but she was concerned that Maureen had entered the woods alone and without clothing. That distinction matters. The idea didn't worry the people around her. The way she chose to execute it did. But by the time that concern crystallized, Maureen was already gone. Now it is June 9, 2013. The evening everything changed. A group of friends had driven out to Canyon Creek Campground, a remote site inside Gifford Pinchot National Forest near Cougar, Washington. This is southern Washington state, in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. The forest here is old, dense, and vast, over 1.3 million acres of it, spanning more than 2,000 square miles. The day had been warm and clear. Temperatures hit the mid-70s, the kind of early June afternoon that makes the Pacific Northwest feel gentle and inviting. Around 5 p.m., with plenty of daylight left, Maureen told the group she was going on her spiritual quest. She wanted to reconnect with nature. She'd be back by midnight. Then she removed all of her clothing, everything, including her shoes. She strapped on a fanny pack. Inside it, a knife, a compass, and matches, and walked barefoot out of the campground and into the forest. Under Sheriff Cox's quote about the moment has become the defining line of this case. The folks that she was with, they felt that this was something she needed to do, so they let her go. Here's what they may not have fully considered. June 9, 2013 was the day after a new moon. That's significant because a new moon means essentially zero moonlight. Once the sun set, the forest, already dark under heavy old-growth canopy, would have been as close to pitch black as an outdoor environment gets. Without a flashlight, you wouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face, let alone navigate rocky, root-covered terrain. And as the hours passed, the temperature dropped. By nightfall, it was in the 40s. That's cold enough to be uncomfortable with a jacket and a sleeping bag. For someone with no clothing whatsoever, standing in the open air with bare skin exposed to the elements, that kind of temperature is genuinely dangerous. Midnight came. Maureen didn't. Her friends waited. Then, early on the morning of June 10, they called the Skamania County Sheriff's Department. Search and rescue teams mobilized on the morning of June 10. Multiple crews, professional searchers and volunteers, fanned out from Canyon Creek Campground and headed into the surrounding forest. What they walked into was terrain that seemed almost purposefully designed to swallow a person whole. Sharon Ward from the Pacific Crest Search Dogs, a volunteer K9 search collective dispatched to help find Maureen, described what they encountered in terms that still carry weight years later. Where she entered the creek is amazingly steep. It's called Canyon Creek Campground for a reason. It's very, very steep. So how she got down there barefoot is a wonder, and how she came up out of the bottom is a wonder. That observation tells us something critical. Searchers were able to pick up Maureen's trail, at least partially. They found bare footprints on the far side of Canyon Creek, prints that matched the size and shape of her feet. She had somehow descended a steep ravine, crossed the creek, and climbed back up the opposite bank, barefoot, likely in near total darkness, over terrain that professional searchers found challenging in broad daylight with proper gear. That level of physical effort suggests she wasn't stumbling around aimlessly. She was moving with direction and purpose. Whether that purpose made rational sense given the conditions is another question entirely, but she was going somewhere. The footprints led searchers north toward Forest Service Road 54, and this is where the trail dies. When the tracks reached the paved road surface, they ended. K9 units brought in to continue tracking couldn't pick up her scent on the asphalt. Undersheriff Cox added another detail that underscores just how difficult this search was. Because of the density of the underbrush in the area, he said, a searcher could literally walk right on top of somebody if they're rolled under a log and never know it. That's not hyperbole. The forest floor in this part of Gifford Pinchot, clean, walkable surface. It's a chaotic tangle of downed logs in various stages of decay, moss-covered boulders, thick branch beds, and aggressive underwood plants. Salal, Oregon grape, vine maple, devil's club. Devil's club alone can grow 6 feet tall, with spiny stems that punish anyone who tries to push through. Visibility at ground level in this kind of brush can drop to just a few feet, even in full daylight, and the terrain isn't flat. The Canyon Creek area is defined by steep, V-shaped rifts carved by water, with ridges between them that rise sharply. The elevation changes are constant and punishing. A person who fell into one of those ravines, or who deliberately climbed down into one seeking shelter, could end up completely hidden from view. The official organized search for Maureen lasted 2 days. That's 48 hours of active, coordinated effort in a forest that stretches across 2,000 square miles. The decision to suspend the search wasn't subjective, but it felt brutal. In search and rescue operations, the timeline for calling off an active search is driven by survival estimates. A person without clothing, without shelter, without food, exposed to nighttime temperatures in the 40s. The survival window is measured in hours, not days. Severe hypothermia can set in within 2 to 4 hours under those conditions. After 48 hours with no sign, no sound, no signal of any kind, the statistical likelihood of finding someone alive drops to near zero. But statistics aren't much comfort when it's your family member who's missing. Maureen's family and friends pushed back against the suspension. They protested, they advocated, and the search was briefly resumed. Additional volunteers went back into the forest, but the result was the same. Nothing. No trace of Maureen, no trace of her fanny pack, no trace of anything she'd carried with her. The search was suspended for good. The organized, government-funded effort was over. That doesn't mean everyone stopped looking. Volunteers, some connected to Maureen personally, others who'd simply heard about the case, continued to comb parts of the forest in the weeks and months that followed. One person who knew a former coworker of Maureen's from high school said that coworker helped search for months after the official effort ended, but the forest gave up nothing. And in that time, something else was confirmed, or rather, something was ruled out. Investigators found no evidence that Maureen had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol when she walked into the woods. That detail matters because it's the first place a lot of people's minds go. Surely, they think, she must have been high on something to strip naked and walk barefoot into a dark forest. But there's no indication of that. Her behavior was unconventional. Yes, it was risky, absolutely, but it was planned, discussed beforehand, and executed with a level of calm that doesn't fit substance-induced damage. She was sober. She believed in what she was doing. Understanding what likely happened to Maureen requires understanding hypothermia, not in the abstract textbook sense, but in the specific physiological reality of what it does to a human body exposed to the conditions she faced. When your core temperature drops below roughly 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the first thing that goes is your judgment. You start making decisions that feel rational in the moment, but aren't. Your coordination degrades. Fine motor skills disappear first. You can't work a zipper, can't strike a match reliably. Then gross motor skills follow. Walking becomes unsteady. You stumble. You fall. As the core temperature continues to slide, into the upper 80s, then the low 80s, your thinking becomes genuinely confused. You may not know where you are. You may not remember where you were going. You may sit down to rest and not get back up. There's a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing that occurs in many hypothermia cases, where victims strip off their clothing because their failing nervous system creates a false sensation of intense heat. In Maureen's case, she was already unclothed, so that particular symptom wouldn't have been visible. But the cognitive effects, the confusion, the disorientation, the loss of spatial awareness, those would have hit hard. And there's another behavior associated with severe hypothermia called terminal burrowing. As the body shuts down, victims impulsively crawl into small enclosed spaces, under bushes, beneath fallen logs, into gaps. It's a primitive mammalian response, and it means the final resting place of a hypothermia victim is often somewhere incredibly difficult to see, even from just a few feet away. Combine terminal burrowing with the kind of terrain around Canyon Creek, down timber everywhere, thick brush, steep ravines, and you have a scenario where a body could come to rest in a location that searchers might walk directly past without ever seeing it. Now add time. In the wet climate of the Pacific Northwest, decomposition is rapid. Insects, moisture, and acidic soil break down soft tissue quickly. And then there are the scavengers, black bears, coyotes, cougars, and smaller animals like raccoons and rodents are all present in Gifford Pinchot. A body left in the open would be disturbed and scattered within days. Bones would be dragged, gnawed, and dispersed over a wide area. Within a year, there might be nothing left in any one location that's recognizable as human remains. This is, according to Under Sheriff Cox, the most likely scenario. Maureen submitted to the elements on the night of June 9 or in the early hours of June 10, and her body was subsequently scattered by wildlife. The footprints stopping at Forest Service Road 54 remain the single most debated piece of evidence in this case, and people have been arguing about what it means since the day it was discovered. The simplest explanation is physical. Asphalt doesn't record bare footprints the way soft soil does. If Maureen stepped onto the road and kept walking in any direction, she wouldn't have left visible impressions. And paved surfaces, especially ones exposed to sun and wind, don't hold scent molecules the way organic ground cover does. Canine teams rely on scent pooling in vegetation and soil particles. A baked dry road surface disperses those molecules quickly, making it extremely difficult for dogs to track. So the tracks disappearing at the road might simply mean the road couldn't tell us where she went next. Not that she stopped moving, not that something happened to her there, just that the medium changed and the evidence ran out. But there's the other interpretation, and it's the one that keeps this case from being neatly filed away. Forest Service Road 54 is a real road. Vehicles use it. It's remote, yes, but not impassable. If someone was driving along that road late at night and encountered a young woman, naked, barefoot, possibly disoriented, that encounter could have gone in several directions. Someone might have offered help and driven her to safety. Someone might have picked her up with less benevolent intentions. Authorities have consistently said they do not suspect foul play in Maureen's disappearance, but it's worth being precise about what that means. It means they found no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle at the campsite, no blood, no torn clothing, she wasn't wearing any, no witnesses reporting suspicious vehicles or persons. The absence of evidence pointing to a crime doesn't prove a crime didn't occur. It means the evidence they do have points more strongly in other directions, and it does. The conditions, the cold, the darkness, the terrain, the lack of clothing, all point toward environmental exposure as the most probable cause. But probable isn't certain, and the road remains a loose thread that can't be tied off. Without a body, without conclusive physical evidence, without witnesses to anything that happened after Maureen left the campground, the case has settled into two opposing theories. Each has strengths, each has gaps. Environmental exposure. This is the theory held by investigators and supported by the available evidence. Maureen crossed Canyon Creek, climbed the far bank, made it to Forest Service Road 54, and at some point, either on the road or after leaving it, she succumbed to hypothermia. Her body ended up in dense brush or under fallen timber, where it was broken down by weather, decomposition, and animal activity until there was nothing left to find. This theory fits the conditions perfectly. It explains the lack of remains. It explains the lack of foul play evidence. It's the principal answer, the gap. No remains have been definitively recovered and linked to her, so it remains unconfirmed, voluntary disappearance. Her friend Yasmin put it simply, she may not want to be found. Maybe the spiritual quest wasn't a one-night experience. Maybe it was a permanent permanent departure. She was 19, legally an adult, with a free-spirited personality and a deep desire to live outside conventional boundaries. Maybe she kept walking and started a new life somewhere, off the grid, under a different name. The problem with this theory is that voluntary disappearances in the modern era are extraordinarily difficult to maintain. No credit card activity, no social media presence, no sightings, no contact with any family member or friend in over a decade. People do disappear voluntarily, but sustaining it for this long, starting from a position of having no money, no ID, no clothes, and no shoes, strains credibility. None of these theories can be fully confirmed or ruled out, and that ambiguity is what makes the case so difficult to put down. This case has circulated through online forums, internet threads, and true crime communities for years, and while a lot of it is speculative noise, some of the observations about this case come from people with genuine local knowledge, and they're worth hearing. One person, who knew a former co-worker of Maureen's, someone who attended the same high school and helped in the search for months, described the experience as one of the most frustrating they'd ever heard about from a search and rescue standpoint. They said the terrain up there gets impossibly rugged, with dense forest and heavy secondary plants that make walking difficult even in daylight, let alone in darkness. This person said they'd gone back to the area several times since and driven along the Forest Service road, looking up into the mountains each time, and every time the conclusion was the same. It's painfully obvious that she could never be found even if she was somewhere quite close to the road. It's an absolute jumble of unrelenting wilderness pierced by a Forest Service road. That's someone who's been there, who's seen it, and their assessment lines up perfectly with what the professional searchers and the undersheriff said. Others have raised the sobriety question from the opposite direction, not to accuse Maureen of being under the influence, but to question the judgment of the friends who let her go. One said, put it bluntly, "I can only assume none of the people who thought this was a good idea were sober." It's a harsh take, but it reflects the genuine bewilderment many people feel when they learn the details of this case. How do you watch a friend walk naked into a dark forest and not physically intervene? The answer, uncomfortable as it is, seems to be rooted in the culture of the friend group and in the way Maureen framed what she was doing. She prepared them for it. She'd normalized it through months of discussion. She presented it as something meaningful and personal, a spiritual practice, not a reckless stunt. Maureen Kelly isn't the only person who vanished in Gifford Pinchot National Forest in 2013. Christopher Zitzwitz, a hiker, also disappeared in the same forest that same year, under separate circumstances. Details about Zitzwitz's disappearance are less widely reported, and the two cases don't appear to be directly connected. But the fact that two people went missing in the same vast forest in the same year emphasizes something about the nature of the place itself. Gifford Pinchot National Forest is not a manicured park with maintained trails and ranger stations every half mile. Large portions of it are genuine backcountry, remote, untrailed, and seldom visited by anyone. It's the kind of place where a wrong turn or a moment of bad luck can put you beyond the reach of help and beyond the reach of searchers. The connection between the two cases became relevant again in August 2024, when human remains were discovered somewhere within Gifford Pinchot National Forest. The specific location of the discovery hasn't been made widely public. What's been reported is that investigators believe the remains could potentially belong to either Maureen Kelly or Christopher Zitzwitz, but as of the most recent available information, identification has not been confirmed. Forensic identification of remains found in wilderness settings is a slow, painstaking process. If the remains are partial, which is likely given the time elapsed, the climate, and animal activity, DNA extraction and comparison can take months. Dental records require matching against existing records, which may or may not be available, and in some cases, remains are too degraded for conclusive identification by any method. If the remains turn out to be Maureen's, it would almost certainly confirm the environmental exposure theory. She died in the forest, probably that first night or shortly after, and her body was consumed by the landscape over the following months and years. It would bring a form of closure to her family, not the kind anyone wants, but the kind that at least provides an answer. If the remains belong to Zitzwitz or to someone else entirely, then Maureen Kelly's case stays exactly where it's been for over a decade, open and unresolved. Maureen Kelly's mother, Mapwana, raised her daughter alone. Think about that for a moment. A single mother who watched her kid grow up, graduate high school, start posting music online, start building a life, and then one day, got a phone call that her daughter walked into the woods and didn't come back. The families of missing persons carry a specific kind of grief that's different from the grief of a confirmed death. There's no body to bury, no funeral that feels final, no moment where you can say, this is what happened, and begin the long process of living with it. Instead, there's an open door that never closes. Every phone call could be the one. Every news report about remains found in a forest could be about your person, and every year that passes makes it less likely that the call will ever come, but you can't stop waiting for it. Maureen's half-sister spoke publicly about her in terms that suggest love and warmth and genuine confusion. She understood who Maureen was, the free spirit, the musician, the person who didn't live by other people's rules. But understanding someone's personality doesn't make their absence easier to bear, and the specific way Maureen disappeared, willingly, purposefully, while her friends watched, adds a dimension of complexity to the family's grief that most people will never have to cope with. As of the most recent available information, Maureen Kelly's case remains open with the Skamania County Sheriff's Office. No positive identification has been publicly announced regarding the human remains found in Gifford Pinchot National Forest in August 2024. The remains could be Maureen's, they could be Christopher Zitzewitz's, they could belong to someone else entirely. There is no confirmed evidence that Maureen Kelly is alive. There is no confirmed evidence that she is dead. There is no evidence of criminal activity related to her disappearance. There is only a forest, a set of bare footprints leading to a road, and then nothing. If you have any information about the disappearance of Maureen Kelly, the Skamania County Sheriff's Office asks that you come forward. Her case is still active. Her family is still waiting for an answer that the forest, so far, has refused to provide. That's it for today's video. If you liked the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I will see you in another case. Until then, goodbye and good night.